Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the silk slippers of absolute power, where your morning breath could literally start wars, and your daily routine involves more gold than most countries possess. Picture this. You're lying on a bed that cost more than a small village's annual income, wrapped in sheets woven from threads so fine they make modern Egyptian cotton feel like burlap. The year is 1650. You're Emperor Shah Jahan, and you're about to experience a day so ridiculously opulent that you probably won't survive the sheer, overwhelming luxury of it. All your modern sensibilities would short-circuit somewhere between the jewel-encrusted breakfast utensils and the army of servants whose sole job is to make sure your royal feet never touch cold marble. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how this community spans the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first hint of dawn creeps through latticed windows carved from single blocks of marble, their intricate patterns casting shadows that dance across walls inlaid with semi-precious stones. You don't wake naturally. That would be beneath your station. Instead, a designated court musician begins playing the sitar just outside your chamber, the melody specifically composed to ease the imperial consciousness from sleep to wakefulness. The Mughal court had morning ragas designed for this exact purpose, musical pieces that supposedly aligned with your body's natural rhythms and the movement of celestial bodies. Your personal attendant, a man who spent decades learning the precise timing of your breathing patterns during sleep, approaches with practiced silence. He carries a small brazier burning expensive Arabian frankincense mixed with Indian sandalwood, a combination that costs more per ounce than most people earn in a month. The smoke curls around your bed's canopy, itself a masterpiece of Chinese silk embroidered with golden threads depicting hunting scenes and Persian poetry. As consciousness fully returns, you become aware of the subtle sounds that indicate your empire is already in motion. Distant temple bells calling the faithful to prayer, the soft shuffle of servants preparing your daily necessities, and the gentle splash of water being poured into ceremonial vessels. The Mughal Empire never slept while you rested. Administrators worked by candlelight processing reports from territories spanning from Afghanistan to the Deccan Plateau. Your first official act isn't political or military, it's spiritual. A court astrologer enters, consulting charts that determine the most auspicious time for you to rise completely. Historians still argue whether Mughal emperors genuinely believed in astrological timing, or simply used it as another tool to demonstrate their divine connection to cosmic forces. The astrologer whispers the day's planetary alignments, warning you that Mercury's position suggests caution in financial matters, while Jupiter's influence favors artistic endeavors. The room itself tells the story of your power. Walls decorated with miniature paintings depicting your ancestors' conquests, shelves holding manuscripts copied by the finest calligraphers in your realm, and windows positioned to catch the first light of dawn, because even architecture bends to imperial will. The air carries hints of rose, water already being prepared for your morning ablutions, mixed with the earthy scent of wet marble from courtyards being cleaned by night shift servants. Your awakening isn't just personal, it's a state event that sets the rhythm for an empire containing roughly 150 million people, making it one of the most populous political entities of its time. Every movement you make ripples outward through layers of court hierarchy, from the Grand Vizier already reviewing the day's agenda, to provincial governors hundreds of miles away who will receive your commands by evening. You don't simply get out of bed, you transition from one state of imperial being to another through a process so elaborate it requires its own staff of specialists. As your feet touch the floor, they meet silk carpets from Persia, each knot tied by artisans who spent months perfecting patterns that tell stories of ancient kings and mythical creatures. The marble beneath stays perfectly warm, thanks to an ingenious system of heated air channels running beneath the palace floors, medieval central heating that wouldn't be matched in Europe for centuries. Your personal valet approaches carrying a robe made from Kashmiri pashmina, so fine it can pass through a wedding ring, dyed with saffron that costs its weight in silver. The morning ablution isn't just washing, it's a ceremony that transforms you from a sleeping mortal into the shadow of God on earth, as Mughal emperors styled themselves. Water for your bath comes from sacred rivers, transported in silver vessels and mixed with rose petals that were gathered at dawn by servants who sang specific prayers during the collection process. The bathhouse attached to your private chambers rivals Roman thermal baths in its sophistication. Streams of perfumed water flow from fountains carved to resemble lotus blossoms, while attendants test the temperature using their elbows because their hands aren't sensitive enough for imperial skin. The soap, if you can call it, that consists of ground pearls mixed with honey and oils extracted from rare flowers that bloom only in the highest Himalayan valleys. Your ancestors believed that external purity reflected spiritual cleanliness, making this daily ritual essential for maintaining divine favor. Musicians position themselves behind carved screens, playing morning ragas on instruments whose wood was seasoned for decades before construction. The melody changes subtly as you move through different phases of bathing, with specific rhythms designed to promote circulation and mental clarity. Historians still argue whether this musical accompaniment had genuine therapeutic effects, or simply served as another display of imperial resources that could transform basic human needs into elaborate performances. Servants attend to every detail with movements choreographed through years of training. One holds mirrors polished to perfection. Another manages towels warmed over braziers, while a third prepares oils extracted from plants grown in the palace's private botanical gardens. The mirrors themselves tell stories, framed in precious metals, and positioned to catch light in ways that flatter imperial features while concealing any signs of mortality that might undermine divine authority. Your reflection gazes back from surfaces that have witnessed the ablutions of conquerors, showing a face that millions of subjects will never see, but whose commands shape their daily lives. The attendants work in practiced silence, understanding that morning conversation disrupts the spiritual transition from private person to public emperor. They've learned to read your moods through subtle changes in posture and breathing, adjusting their service accordingly without need for verbal instruction. The water itself holds significance beyond cleansing. Mughal court physicians believed that different mineral compositions could influence imperial health and longevity. Springs were tested throughout the empire, with the finest examples reserved exclusively for royal use. Caravans transported these precious liquids across thousands of miles, creating a supply chain dedicated solely to imperial hygiene that probably consumed more resources than some European kingdoms' entire annual budgets. As the ablution concludes, you emerge not just clean, but transformed into the day's version of imperial majesty. The entire process takes nearly an hour, during which ministers wait in outer chambers with urgent dispatches that will shape the fate of millions. Yet, they understand that imperial transformation cannot be rushed. The empire's stability depends on your transition from vulnerable humanity to invincible sovereignty being completed with proper ceremonial dignity. Your morning meal arrives not as simple sustenance, but as a parade of culinary artistry that would make modern celebrity chefs weep with inadequacy. Picture dozens of servants entering in precise formation, each carrying dishes that represent the finest cooking techniques from across your vast empire. Indian spices married with Persian presentation, Turkish influences blended with local ingredients, all prepared by cooks whose families have served the imperial kitchen for generations. The breakfast spread covers tables made from single pieces of inlaid marble, their surfaces decorated with semi-precious stones arranged in patterns that mirror the geometric designs of your favorite mosques. Gold and silver plates reflect morning light streaming through windows, creating a display that's part meal, part treasury exhibition. Each dish tells the story of conquest and cultural synthesis. Your empire's greatest achievement wasn't military victory, but the fusion of diverse culinary traditions into something entirely new. Food tasters step forward first, men whose lives depend on their ability to detect poison while maintaining the poker face of professional risk-takers. They sample from each dish with ceremonial spoons, their expressions carefully neutral as they consume potential death for your safety. The position of imperial food taster was hereditary, passed down through families who developed legendary palates and presumably robust constitutions. Historians still argue whether the constant fear of assassination was genuine paranoia or calculated theater designed to remind everyone of your mortality, and by extension, their own. The menu itself reads like a love letter to excess. Rice cooked with saffron threads, worth more than most annual salaries. Meats prepared with spice combinations, guarded as jealously as military secrets. Fruits cultivated in palace gardens, where every tree receives individual attention from specialized gardeners. Mangoes arrive from orchards, where each fruit is hand-selected at peak ripeness, while grapes come from vines that grow in soil mixed with crushed pearls, because apparently regular dirt wasn't good enough for imperial fruit. Beverages flow from vessels that themselves could fund small armies. Sherbet cooled with ice, transported from mountain peaks. Tea blended according to recipes known only to court physicians. And water flavored with rose petals and silver leaf that dissolves on your tongue like edible wealth. The ice alone represents a logistical marvel. Imagine the supply chain required to keep frozen mountain water solid during transport across desert regions, all so you can enjoy a cold drink with breakfast. Your eating utensils make modern luxury seem quaint by comparison. Spoons carved from single pieces of jade, knives with handles encrusted with rubies, plates so thin they're nearly transparent, yet somehow unbreakable. Each implement was crafted by artisans who spent their entire careers perfecting techniques for transforming precious materials into functional art. The salt and pepper shakers, if we can call them that, are miniature architectural marvels. Tiny buildings, complete with doors that open to dispense seasonings. Musicians continue playing softly in the background, their melodies chosen specifically to aid digestion, according to ancient Ayurvedic principles. The court believed that certain musical intervals could stimulate gastric juices and promote healthy metabolism, turning even your body's basic functions into opportunities for displaying imperial sophistication. Whether this actually worked or just made expensive meals even more elaborate is lost to history, but the musicians certainly looked impressive doing it. The meal itself becomes a form of statecraft, as various courtiers are permitted to observe your dining, their positions in the room reflecting their current standing in imperial favor. Those closest to your table bask in reflected glory, while others calculate how their own political fortunes might rise or fall based on subtle changes in your eating patterns. Even your breakfast preferences could influence trade routes and agricultural policies across the subcontinent. Remember that rose water from your morning ablutions. It reappears here in delicate finger bowls because imperial hands must be cleansed between courses with the same precious liquids used for bathing. The entire meal represents hours of preparation by hundreds of people, all focused on ensuring that your first calories of the day arrive in a form worthy of divine consumption. The transition from private breakfast to public audience happens with theatrical precision that would make Broadway directors envious. As you move toward the hall of public audience, the Diwan-i-am, servants have already arranged themselves along your route like a human carpet of bowing figures, each person's position determined by complex protocols developed over generations of imperial service. Your footsteps echo off marble floors inlaid with precious stones, creating a rhythm that announces divine presence to anyone within hearing distance. The hall itself defies architectural logic, a space designed to make grown men feel like children in the presence of something infinitely greater than themselves. Columns carved from single pieces of stone rise toward ceilings decorated with gold leaf applied in patterns that hurt to look at directly, intentional design choices meant to overwhelm visitors with visual proof of imperial power. The throne waiting for you isn't furniture. It's a political statement made from materials that most people will never touch, let alone sit upon. Your entrance triggers a choreographed display of submission that took years for court officials to perfect. Nobles prostrate themselves in waves, their movements timed to create visual patterns as you progress toward the throne. The most powerful men in your empire, governors, who control territories larger than European kingdoms, generals who command armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands, all press their foreheads to marble floors in acknowledgement that their authority derives entirely from your will. The peacock throne itself deserves its legendary reputation. A seat constructed from materials valuable enough to ransom entire nations, decorated with gems that catch morning light and throw rainbow patterns across the walls. Sitting upon it transforms you from a person into a living symbol of imperial power, your elevated position allowing you to gaze down upon subjects who dare not meet your eyes without explicit permission. The throne's construction required the skills of craftsmen from across the known world: Indian jewelers, Persian metalworkers, Chinese silk weavers, all collaborating to create seating worthy of earthly divinity. Court business begins with the presentation of petitions, documents written on paper so fine it seems to glow in morning light, their calligraphy executed by scribes whose handwriting is considered an art form. Each petition represents months or years of preparation by supplicants who have traveled thousands of miles for moments in your presence. Justice in the Mughal Empire isn't abstract, it's personal, dispensed by imperial will from a throne that makes clear the cosmic hierarchy, placing you just below divine authority. The cases themselves reveal the empire's incredible diversity. Merchant disputes involving trade routes that span continents, inheritance claims affecting noble families whose wealth rivals small kingdoms, and territorial arguments between provincial governors whose decisions impact millions of lives. Your judgments ripple outward through administrative networks, becoming law across territories so vast that news of your morning decisions won't reach distant provinces for weeks. Historians still argue whether Mughal justice was genuinely fair or simply effective theater designed to demonstrate imperial wisdom. The truth probably lies somewhere between your education, included extensive training in Islamic law, Hindu legal traditions, and practical statecraft, making you genuinely qualified to render decisions, even as the theatrical setting emphasized your authority. The combination of legitimate expertise and overwhelming display created a system where justice and power reinforced each other. Gift presentations follow legal proceedings, with tribute bearers approaching the throne carrying offerings that represent the empire's incredible reach. Silk from Chinese traders, spices from southern kingdoms, precious metals from northern mines, and exotic animals from regions most people believe are mythical. Each gift acknowledges your supremacy while demonstrating the giver's own importance, a complex dance of submission and status that defines imperial court culture. The morning audience concludes with your public prayers, performed in full view of assembled nobles who join their voices to yours in expressions of divine gratitude. This isn't private devotion, it's statecraft through spirituality, demonstrating your piety while reinforcing the connection between earthly and heavenly authority that legitimizes imperial power. As the prayers end, you rise from the throne, and the hall slowly empties, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive incense and the echo of power exercised with ceremonial precision. Leaving the public audience hall, you enter the private world of imperial administration, where the real work of governing 150 million people happens behind doors guarded by men who die before revealing state secrets. The transition from public theater to private governance reveals the exhausting reality behind imperial glamour. Ruling an empire requires processing information flows that would challenge modern governments equipped with computers and instant communication. Your private study resembles a war room more than an office, with maps covering walls that show territories stretching from Afghanistan's mountain passes to Bengal's rice paddies, from Kashmir's alpine valleys to the Deccan Plateau's fortress cities. Each map represents months of surveying work by teams of cartographers, astronomers, and military engineers, whose measurements could determine the outcome of campaigns and the flow of trade routes worth millions in annual revenue. Dispatches arrive throughout the morning via a postal system that puts medieval European communications to shame. Relay stations positioned at precise intervals across the empire, with fresh horses and riders, maintaining delivery schedules that can transport urgent messages from Delhi to Lahore in 3 days. A logistical achievement that won't be matched in most parts of the world until the 19th century. The Imperial Post Office employed thousands of riders, maintained tens of thousands of horses, and operated with military precision because delayed information could cost provinces or lives. Revenue reports spread across tables like financial poetry written in Persian script, documenting tax collections from agricultural regions where monsoon patterns determine imperial prosperity. Your finance ministers have calculated exactly how much revenue each district should generate based on soil quality, rainfall patterns, and population density, creating a taxation system so sophisticated it won't be surpassed until modern statistical analysis. The numbers tell stories of abundant harvests and struggling communities, successful merchants, and declining trade routes, all requiring imperial decisions that balance extraction with sustainability. Provincial governors send detailed reports about local conditions, their correspondence revealing the challenge of maintaining imperial authority across territories so diverse that your subjects speak dozens of languages, follow different religious traditions, and live under varying local customs. Each governor's letter represents a balancing act between imperial directives and regional realities, requiring you to make decisions that account for cultural differences while maintaining political unity. Military intelligence arrives in coded dispatches that document troop movements, fortress conditions, and potential threats from rivals who never stop probing for imperial weaknesses. Your spymaster, a position so sensitive that most court officials don't know his identity, maintains networks of informants from Kabul to Goa, providing information that could prevent rebellions or reveal invasion plans before enemies complete their preparations. Historians still argue whether Mughal intelligence networks were as extensive as claimed, but surviving documents suggest surveillance capabilities that rival modern intelligence agencies. Trade reports document the flow of goods through commercial networks that connect your empire to markets from Istanbul to Jakarta, with imperial taxes on merchant activity generating revenues that fund military campaigns and architectural projects. Silk, spices, precious metals, and manufactured goods move along routes protected by imperial troops, creating economic interdependencies that make military conquest less appealing than commercial cooperation for many potential rivals. Diplomatic correspondence requires the most delicate handling, with letters from Safavid Persia, Ottoman Turkey, and various Indian kingdoms requiring responses that balance courtesy with strength, friendship with suspicion. Each diplomatic exchange could influence alliance patterns, trade agreements, and military cooperation in ways that affect millions of lives. Your responses are crafted by specialists in international relations who understand that a misplaced word could trigger conflicts or opportunities. Legal appeals from provincial courts arrive requesting imperial intervention in cases too complex or politically sensitive for local resolution, making you the final arbiter of justice for subjects you'll never meet in person. These documents reveal the human cost of imperial governance, families torn apart by inheritance disputes, communities divided by resource conflicts, individuals seeking protection from local authorities who have exceeded their legitimate power. The morning's administrative work concludes with strategic planning sessions where your closest advisors debate long-term policies affecting everything from military modernization to agricultural development. Their discussions, informed by intelligence that provides remarkably detailed pictures of conditions throughout your domains. These men have spent decades learning the art of imperial governance, understanding that effective rule requires balancing competing interests while maintaining the appearance of effortless authority that keeps your subjects convinced of imperial invincibility. The imperial hunt represents everything magnificent and slightly absurd about your lifestyle. Imagine coordinating a military operation whose sole purpose is killing deer with maximum possible style and expense. As you emerge from the administrative chambers, hundreds of servants have already transformed the palace courtyard into a staging area that resembles preparation for a royal military campaign, complete with elephants wearing ceremonial armor and hunting cheetahs lounging on silk cushions like oversized, deadly house cats. You're hunting elephant because walking is apparently beneath imperial dignity, stands ready with a howdah that's essentially a mobile throne room complete with cushioned seating, silk canopies, and compartments for refreshments that will keep you comfortable during the exhausting ordeal of sitting, while someone else does the actual work of transportation. The elephant itself represents a fortune in training and maintenance, fed a diet that includes sugar cane, exotic fruits, and specially prepared grain mixtures designed to optimize both health and temperament. The hunting party assembles like a small army preparing for conquest. Mounted nobles carrying weapons that cost more than most people's houses. Foot soldiers whose job is primarily to look impressive while beating bushes to flush game toward your position. And a support crew managing everything from emergency medical supplies to portable kitchens capable of preparing multi-course meals in forest clearings. Mughal hunts weren't recreational activities. They were displays of imperial power that required months of planning and logistical coordination. Your hunting cheetahs deserve special mention because they represent one of history's most ridiculous luxury expenses. Wild predators captured as cubs, trained through years of patient work by specialized handlers, and maintained at enormous cost for the sole purpose of occasionally catching deer in a manner that makes you look impressive. These animals wear jeweled collars and travel on cushioned carts, attended by servants whose only job is ensuring that imperial hunting cats remain comfortable and properly fed between opportunities to demonstrate their deadly skills. The hunting ground itself has been prepared like a stage set, with beaters positioned days in advance to ensure that game animals will appear at precisely the right moments to provide satisfactory sport without actual danger to imperial persons. Your safety requires that spontaneity be carefully choreographed. Real hunting involves genuine risk, but imperial hunting must guarantee success while maintaining the illusion of adventure and skill. Musicians accompany the expedition because apparently even wildlife needs a soundtrack, playing melodies designed to complement the excitement of the chase, while somehow not frightening away the animals you're trying to kill. The court believed that certain musical modes could influence animal behavior, creating a pseudoscientific justification for bringing an entire orchestra to what's essentially an elaborate outdoor barbecue with entertainment provided by dying deer. Historians still argue whether Mughal emperors were genuinely skilled hunters or simply excellent at managing public relations around carefully orchestrated displays of imperial prowess. The truth probably varies by individual ruler, but the hunts themselves served multiple political purposes, demonstrating imperial health and vigor, providing opportunities for informal discussions with nobles, and maintaining military readiness through activities that resembled warfare while avoiding actual combat risks. The weapons you carry represent masterpieces of metalworking and decoration, bows inlaid with precious metals, arrows fletched with exotic feathers, and blades whose hilts contain enough gemstones to fund small kingdoms. These aren't practical hunting tools, but ceremonial objects designed to make the act of killing animals look like divine artistry. Your marksmanship skills were developed through years of training with master archers, but the targets during actual hunts are positioned and managed to ensure impressive results regardless of natural ability. Refreshment stations positioned throughout the hunting ground provide opportunities to rest while maintaining imperial dignity, with portable pavilions that can be erected in minutes to create temporary palaces complete with carpets, cushions, and servants bearing chilled drinks and delicate snacks. Even recreational killing requires luxury accommodations that most people couldn't afford for permanent housing. Remember those administrative dispatches from earlier. Messengers find you even during hunting expeditions because imperial governance never pauses for recreational activities. Urgent communications reach you via relay systems that can locate your hunting party anywhere within the royal preserves, ensuring that state business continues even while you're enjoying elaborate methods of animal execution. The expedition concludes with ceremonies honoring successful kills, as court artists quickly sketch scenes that will become paintings commemorating your hunting prowess, and poets compose verses celebrating your skill in transforming living creatures into decorative trophies through the application of imperial will and expensive equipment. Returning from the hunt, you transition from imperial predator to imperial patron, a role transformation that reveals the Mughal Empire's greatest cultural achievement, creating conditions where art, literature, and learning could flourish under the protection of absolute power. Your afternoon begins in the palace library, a space that makes modern university collections look like modest reading rooms, with manuscripts copied by the finest calligraphers in the Islamic world and books bound in leather so luxurious it seems almost sinful to touch with unwashed hands. Court scholars await your arrival with the nervous excitement of academics who understand that imperial favor can make careers, while imperial displeasure can end them permanently. These men represent the empire's intellectual elite, theologians who can debate fine points of Islamic law, historians who chronicle your dynasty's achievements with appropriate reverence, astronomers whose calculations help plan military campaigns and agricultural seasons, and physicians whose medical knowledge keeps you alive long enough to enjoy all this luxury. The manuscript collection itself tells the story of imperial cultural ambition. Persian poetry copied on paper made from silk fibers, Arabic philosophical texts illustrated with miniature paintings that took months to complete, and Hindu religious works translated into Persian to create a literary synthesis that bridges cultural traditions. Your ancestors believed that controlling ideas was as important as controlling territories, making libraries weapons in cultural conquest that could outlast military victories. Poetry recitations begin the afternoon's entertainment as court poets present new works composed specifically for your enjoyment, their verses carefully crafted to praise imperial virtues while demonstrating technical skill that justifies their generous stipends. Mughal poetry wasn't simply artistic expression, it was political communication wrapped in beautiful language, with metaphors that could convey criticism or advice too dangerous to express directly. The poets themselves walked tightropes between artistic integrity and survival, creating works that satisfied both aesthetic standards and political necessities. Artists present their latest paintings during informal viewings that combine art appreciation with subtle negotiations over patronage and status. Mughal miniature painting reached heights of technical perfection that wouldn't be matched anywhere else in the world, with artists developing techniques for creating colors that remain vibrant centuries later, and details so fine they require magnification to fully appreciate. These paintings weren't just decorative, they were historical documents that recorded imperial achievements, cultural celebrations, and daily life with accuracy that rivals photography. Historical chroniclers read passages from works in progress, their accounts of recent events carefully edited to emphasize imperial wisdom, while minimizing any details that might suggest divine rulers are capable of making mistakes. Court historians understood that they were writing official reality, creating narratives that would define how future generations understood current events. Historians still argue whether these chroniclers were propagandists or journalists, but their work provides detailed records of Mughal life that reveal as much through omission as through inclusion. The afternoon includes mathematical discussions with court astronomers, whose calculations serve both practical and religious purposes, determining prayer times with scientific precision, calculating auspicious dates for important ceremonies, and predicting eclipses that might be interpreted as divine signs. These men combined Islamic astronomical traditions with Hindu mathematical innovations and Persian observational techniques, creating a synthesis that advanced human understanding while serving imperial needs. Musical performances feature instruments from across the empire and beyond: sitars from India, ouds from Arabia, and flutes from Central Asia, all played by musicians whose families have served the court for generations. The court believed that different musical modes could influence mood, health, and spiritual development, making concerts therapeutic sessions disguised as entertainment. Whether this musical medicine actually worked is less important than the fact that you could afford to find out through extensive experimentation. Calligraphy lessons continue your personal education in an art form that Mughal culture considered the highest expression of human creativity, the transformation of divine words into visual beauty through disciplined practice and spiritual dedication. Your own handwriting appears on imperial decrees that will be preserved for centuries, making calligraphic skill a form of immortality that ensures imperial personality survives in archived documents. Remember that breakfast silverware encrusted with precious stones. The artistic principles that created those functional masterpieces appear throughout the afternoon's cultural activities, as craftsmen demonstrate techniques for transforming raw materials into objects that serve practical purposes, while satisfying aesthetic standards that elevate daily life into continuous art appreciation. The scholarly afternoon concludes with discussions of architectural projects that will outlast your reign. As court architects present plans for buildings designed to demonstrate imperial power through mathematical precision, artistic beauty, and engineering innovations that push the boundaries of what's possible with available technologies and unlimited budgets. As afternoon shadows lengthen, the palace transforms into a culinary battlefield where armies of cooks engage in organized chaos designed to produce an evening meal that defies both logic and dietary necessity. The imperial kitchen complex resembles a small city dedicated entirely to food preparation, with specialized areas for different cooking techniques, storage facilities that could supply siege provisions, and staff hierarchies more complex than most government bureaucracies. Head cooks, men whose families have guarded recipe secrets for generations, supervise preparation of dishes that require ingredients from across the known world. Spices arrive from islands most people believe are mythical, preserved in containers that protect flavor and potency during journeys that span months and thousands of miles. The imperial spice collection alone represents enough wealth to fund small wars, with individual seasonings more valuable per ounce than precious metals. Kitchen fires burn in carefully controlled arrangements that create temperature zones suitable for different cooking techniques, from slow braising meats in covered pots to flash searing vegetables in specially designed woks. The fuel itself has been selected for optimal flavor impact. Woods from fruit trees that impart subtle smokiness, charcoal made from specific tree species chosen for consistent heat output, and dried herbs that release aromatic compounds when burned beneath cooking vessels. Recipe preparation involves consulting manuscripts that read like alchemical formulas, with instructions for combining ingredients in proportions calculated to achieve flavor profiles that satisfy imperial palates trained to expect perfection. These culinary texts represent centuries of experimentation and refinement, passed down through cooking dynasties that consider themselves artists rather than mere food preparers. The recipes themselves are state secrets, revealing imperial culinary techniques to rivals, could undermine diplomatic negotiations, where shared meals play crucial roles in alliance building. Meat preparation begins with selections from animals raised specifically for imperial consumption. Lambs fed on mountain grass that produces distinctive flavor, chickens from flocks maintained on diets that include expensive supplements, and game birds hunted in preserves managed like outdoor restaurants. The butchering process follows religious guidelines that ensure spiritual purity while maximizing flavor development through aging techniques that require weeks of careful attention. Vegetable preparation reveals the empire's agricultural sophistication. Produce grown in palace gardens, where soil composition is monitored like a science experiment. Irrigation systems that provide optimal water delivery, and harvesting schedules timed to ensure peak ripeness coincides with meal planning. Some vegetables are grown specifically for individual dishes, with cultivation techniques passed down through gardening families whose knowledge could feed populations or starve them depending on their loyalty to imperial interests. Bread baking alone requires specialized knowledge that transforms simple grains into edible artistry. Flours milled from wheat varieties selected for specific texture characteristics. Yeast cultures maintained through techniques that rival modern biotechnology. And oven temperatures controlled with precision that ensures consistent results despite using medieval equipment. The breads themselves serve multiple purposes: nutrition, flavor, and visual presentation that reinforces imperial status through obvious luxury. Dessert preparation involves techniques that seem impossible without modern refrigeration. Ice-based treats made possible through supply chains that transport frozen water from mountain peaks. Sugar work that creates edible sculptures rivaling architectural achievements. And fruit preserves that capture seasonal flavors for year-round imperial enjoyment. These sweets aren't simply food, they're edible demonstrations of imperial power over natural limitations. Historians still argue whether Mughal cuisine represented genuine culinary innovation or simply expensive fusion cooking that combined existing traditions without creating anything fundamentally new. The surviving recipes suggest both: traditional techniques pushed to extremes through unlimited resources, and genuinely innovative combinations that couldn't exist without imperial patronage, bringing together ingredients and cooking methods from different cultural traditions. Food safety protocols rival modern restaurant standards, with multiple layers of testing and supervision designed to prevent poisoning while maintaining flavor quality. Tasters sample dishes at every stage of preparation. Ingredients are sourced through trusted suppliers whose families have served the court for generations. And cooking vessels are cleaned with procedures that ensure both hygiene and flavor purity. Wine and beverage preparation involves fermentation techniques that create drinks worthy of imperial consumption. Grape varieties cultivated in palace vineyards, aging processes that require years of patient attention, and serving temperatures controlled through methods that demonstrate mastery over natural limitations. The imperial wine collection represents decades of accumulation and careful storage in facilities designed to preserve liquid investments that appreciate in value and prestige over time. Remember those hunting expeditions from earlier. The game killed during afternoon adventures arrives in kitchen areas where specialized cooks transform wild animals into dishes that highlight natural flavors, while demonstrating culinary techniques that make death seem like artistic transformation rather than simple killing. As twilight paints the palace walls in shades of gold and crimson, the evening court transforms into a theatrical space where entertainment becomes statecraft and pleasure serves political purposes. The hall of private audience, your inner sanctum, fills with carefully selected guests whose presence indicates current favor, while their seating arrangements communicate subtle messages about shifting power dynamics within the imperial hierarchy. Dancing girls enter with movements that blur the line between artistic expression and religious devotion. Their performance combining Indian classical traditions with Persian influences and Central Asian elements into something uniquely Mughal. These aren't simple entertainers, but highly trained artists whose families have perfected choreographic traditions for generations. Their dance vocabulary, including hundreds of gestures that convey specific meanings through hand positions, facial expressions, and body movements that tell stories without words. The dancers wear costumes that represent fortunes in themselves. Silk garments dyed with colors that cost more than most annual salaries, jewelry pieces that could fund small armies, and makeup created from crushed pearls and gold leaf that transforms human faces into living art. Their ankle bells are tuned to specific musical intervals, creating percussion that harmonizes with accompanying instruments in mathematical relationships that demonstrate imperial patronage of advanced musical theory. Musicians position themselves according to strict protocols that reflect both artistic requirements and court hierarchy, with master performers occupying places of honor, while apprentices learn through observation and occasional participation. The instruments themselves tell stories of cultural synthesis. Sitars, with strings made from materials gathered across the empire, tabla drums, whose construction requires wood aged for decades, and wind instruments carved from rare materials that produce sounds unlike anything heard outside imperial courts. The musical repertoire includes compositions created specifically for your entertainment, pieces that won't be performed elsewhere because they contain musical references to imperial achievements, personal preferences, and current political situations. Court composers walk the same tightropes as court poets, creating beauty that flatters without seeming obsequious, complexity that demonstrates skill without overshadowing imperial presence, and innovation that advances artistic traditions while respecting cultural boundaries. Storytellers weave narratives that combine historical events with mythological elements, their tales carefully crafted to emphasize imperial legitimacy, while entertaining audiences who have heard every story ever told. These master narrators possess memories that rival modern databases, maintaining repertoires of thousands of stories with variations suitable for different occasions, audiences, and political climates. The stories themselves become historical documents that reveal how imperial propaganda could be transformed into entertainment, so skillful that audiences forgot they were being politically educated. Courtiers compete for your attention through displays of wit, learning, and cultural sophistication that turn conversation into performance art. These men have spent years perfecting the delicate balance between entertaining imperial company and avoiding statements that might be interpreted as disrespectful or politically dangerous. Their discussions range from poetry analysis to philosophical debates, military strategy to architectural theory, all conducted in languages so refined that common people would find them incomprehensible. Wine service begins as servants present beverages that represent the empire's reach and sophistication. Fermented grape juice from palace vineyards, fruit-based drinks that capture the essence of seasonal harvests, and exotic concoctions that combine ingredients from multiple continents into flavors that exist nowhere else in the world. The serving vessels themselves are masterpieces that make drinking seem like participating in artistic expression rather than simple liquid consumption. Gaming activities provide opportunities for courtiers to demonstrate strategic thinking while competing for imperial approval in contests where losing gracefully is as important as winning skillfully. Chess matches use pieces carved from precious materials with boards that represent artistic achievements in their own right. The games themselves serve multiple purposes: entertainment, education in strategic thinking, and subtle evaluation of courtier personalities under competitive pressure. Historians still argue whether Mughal court entertainment was genuinely sophisticated or simply elaborate displays designed to impress visitors and demonstrate imperial wealth. The surviving accounts suggest both genuinely advanced artistic traditions that flourished under imperial patronage and theatrical presentations calculated to overwhelm observers with sensory evidence of power that transcended ordinary human experience. Poetry competitions allow courtiers to demonstrate literary skills while creating verses that will be preserved in imperial libraries, making evening entertainment into historical documentation that captures the cultural atmosphere of specific moments in imperial history. The poems themselves must satisfy multiple criteria: technical excellence, thematic appropriateness, and political sensitivity that ensures artistic expression doesn't accidentally become treasonous statement. Philosophical discussions between court scholars provide intellectual stimulation that combines entertainment with education. As learned men debate questions that have occupied human minds for centuries while demonstrating the breadth of knowledge available within imperial circles. These conversations reveal the empire's cultural sophistication while serving as informal seminars that keep imperial minds sharp and informed about current intellectual developments. The evening's entertainment concludes with ceremonies that honor the day's achievements and preview tomorrow's activities, creating continuity between daily experiences while maintaining the sense that each day in imperial life represents unique opportunities for advancement, learning, and the exercise of power that shapes millions of lives across vast territories. Remember those manuscript collections from the afternoon's scholarly pursuits. Selected texts are read aloud during evening gatherings, transforming private study into shared cultural experience that reinforces the connection between imperial power and intellectual achievement, demonstrating that effective rule requires both military strength and cultural sophistication that can inspire loyalty through beauty as well as fear. As the evening's public entertainment winds down and courtiers begin their elaborate farewell ceremonies, you transition into the most carefully guarded aspect of imperial life, the private world where absolute power meets human relationships, where the shadow of God on earth becomes simply a husband, father, and man, dealing with family dynamics that money and authority can't entirely control. The imperial harem isn't the exotic fantasy that popular imagination suggests. It's a complex political institution where marriages serve diplomatic purposes, where wives represent alliances with powerful families, and where children embody the future of dynastic succession. Your evening visits to family quarters require navigating relationships that combine genuine affection with calculated political necessity, where personal preferences must balance against state interests that affect millions of lives. Your senior wife receives you in chambers that rival the main palace in luxury, surrounded by attendants who have spent decades learning her preferences and protecting her interests within the complex hierarchy of imperial marriages. These women understand that their positions depend entirely on maintaining your favor while advancing their children's claims to eventual succession, creating family dynamics where love and ambition interweave in patterns that would challenge modern marriage counselors. Children's education becomes a daily concern that reveals the burden of preparing young minds for responsibilities that most adults couldn't handle. Future emperors who must learn languages, military strategy, statecraft, and cultural refinement, while somehow maintaining the humanity necessary for effective leadership. Your sons receive training that combines the best available knowledge with practical experience in governance, creating educational programs that make modern elite schooling seem almost casual by comparison. Evening conversations with family members provide opportunities for discussions that can't happen in public settings, where imperial policies can be debated, personal concerns can be expressed, and human relationships can develop outside the constraints of ceremonial protocol. These private moments reveal the isolation that accompanies absolute power. Few people can speak honestly to someone whose displeasure could result in exile or death. Family meals represent the closest thing to normal human experience available in imperial life, though even private dining involves servants, ceremonial elements, and security precautions that remind everyone present that ordinariness is impossible when your existence affects the stability of an empire. The food itself may be simpler than public banquets, but the service and presentation still reflect imperial standards that make casual eating impossible. Historians still argue whether Mughal emperors maintained genuine family relationships, or simply managed domestic politics that served dynastic interests. The surviving personal letters and accounts suggest both real affection that transcended political calculation and constant awareness that family harmony contributed to imperial stability in ways that made personal happiness a matter of state interest. Playing with grandchildren provides moments of joy that reveal the human side of imperial authority, as young voices that haven't learned to fear absolute power bring laughter and spontaneity into lives otherwise governed by protocol and ceremony. These interactions remind you that power is temporary, that dynasties rise and fall, and that simple human pleasures transcend political achievement. Private religious observances with family members create spiritual intimacy that balances the public religious ceremonies designed to demonstrate imperial piety. These quiet prayers, shared readings from sacred texts, and moments of reflection provide opportunities for genuine devotion that doesn't serve political purposes, though even private spirituality carries implications for dynastic legitimacy in empires where divine favor legitimizes earthly authority. Personal correspondence occupies evening hours as you write letters to family members in distant provinces, compose private thoughts in journals that won't be read by court historians, and maintain relationships with relatives whose political positions make public communication impossible. These private writings reveal perspectives on imperial life that official documents never capture, showing how absolute power affects personal relationships and individual psychology. Evening walks through private palace gardens provide opportunities for conversation and reflection away from the constant observation that defines public imperial life. These gardens themselves represent attempts to create natural spaces within artificial environments, places where imperial families can experience beauty and tranquility that isn't entirely shaped by human ambition and political necessity. Medical consultations with court physicians become family affairs, as imperial health affects dynastic stability, succession planning, and the welfare of millions of subjects whose lives depend on imperial continuity. These private health discussions reveal the vulnerability that absolute power can't eliminate, the physical mortality that makes every emperor ultimately temporary despite the permanence of imperial institutions. Remember those administrative reports from the morning. Family discussions often return to matters of state as wives and children, offer perspectives on policies that affect their own political positions, creating informal advisory sessions where personal relationships influence imperial decisions in ways that court officials never document. As darkness settles over the palace complex, the transition from day to night triggers security procedures that transform your residence into a fortress prepared for threats that range from individual assassins to organized military attacks. The shift from public emperor to sleeping mortal requires protocols developed through centuries of experience, with plots, conspiracies, and the constant reality that absolute power creates absolute enemies who never stops searching for opportunities to end your reign permanently. Palace guards begin their nighttime rotations according to schedules that ensure no single person knows the complete security arrangement, with overlapping watches designed to prevent coordination between potential traitors. These men have been selected through processes that examine not only military skill, but family loyalty, personal history, and psychological stability, creating a security force whose members understand that protecting imperial life is both honor and burden that affects their own family's futures. The imperial bedchamber itself becomes the center of defensive preparations that would make modern security teams envious. Multiple entrance points that can be sealed independently, hidden passages that provide escape routes known only to trusted guards, and communication systems that can summon help without alerting potential attackers to defensive preparations. The room's luxury serves dual purposes, comfort and security, with furnishings positioned to provide both aesthetic pleasure and tactical advantages. Food tasting protocols intensify during evening hours as your final meal undergoes even more rigorous testing than daytime dishes, with multiple tasters sampling everything that will enter your presence during nighttime hours. The men who perform this service understand they're literally risking their lives for imperial safety, creating a relationship between ruler and protector that combines loyalty with the constant awareness of mortality that makes palace service both privilege and peril. Guard rotations follow patterns that prevent familiarity from breeding complacency, with personnel assignments that ensure no guard serves the same post for consecutive nights. This systematic unpredictability makes planning attacks nearly impossible, while maintaining security effectiveness through procedures that have been tested against actual assassination attempts. The guards themselves come from different regions and ethnic backgrounds, reducing the possibility of coordinated betrayal while ensuring loyalty diversity that strengthens overall protection. Communication networks activate during nighttime hours as messengers prepare to carry urgent dispatches that might require immediate imperial attention, while intelligence networks maintain surveillance of potential threats that could develop during darkness when normal administrative oversight relaxes. Your spy master's most critical work happens after sunset, when conspirators feel safer conducting activities that daylight makes too dangerous to attempt. Weapons storage areas are secured according to protocols that prevent unauthorized access, while ensuring legitimate defenders can obtain necessary equipment if palace security is breached. The Imperial Armory contains weapons systems sophisticated enough to defeat most contemporary military technology, with firearms, edged weapons, and armor that represent the finest metallurgy and engineering available in the 17th century. Medical preparations include positioning court physicians in locations where they can respond quickly to health emergencies that might occur during nighttime hours, with surgical instruments and medications prepared for immediate use if imperial health requires urgent intervention. These medical professionals understand that imperial survival affects the stability of an empire, making their nighttime readiness a matter of state security rather than simple healthcare provision. Historians still argue whether Mughal security concerns were justified paranoia or reasonable precautions against genuine threats that regularly targeted imperial authority. The documented assassination attempts, palace conspiracies, and succession conflicts suggest that nighttime security preparations represented practical responses to real dangers rather than excessive fear of imaginary enemies. Fire prevention measures become critical during nighttime hours when reduced visibility makes emergency response more difficult, with specially trained personnel monitoring heating systems, candle arrangements, and kitchen facilities that could accidentally destroy palace areas or create opportunities for attackers to use confusion as cover for assassination attempts. The palace's wooden elements, fabric furnishings, and paper documents create fire hazards that require constant vigilance. Family security protocols ensure that imperial wives and children receive protection appropriate to their importance for dynastic continuity, with separate but coordinated defensive arrangements that account for the possibility that attacks might target family members to destabilize imperial authority through personal grief or succession confusion. These defensive measures make normal family life impossible, while providing safety that most people never need to consider. Environmental monitoring includes weather observation that affects defensive preparations, with procedures that account for seasonal changes, monsoon patterns, and astronomical events that might provide cover for attack or influence the timing of assassination attempts. The palace's defensive readiness adapts to natural conditions that affect visibility, movement, and communication effectiveness. Remember those private family moments from earlier. Even intimate conversations with wives and children occur within security frameworks that ensure personal relationships develop under protective oversight that makes genuine privacy impossible. The price of absolute power includes the loss of private life that ordinary people take for granted. As the final security protocols lock into place and the palace settles into its nighttime rhythm of heightened vigilance, you make the transition from public emperor to private human being, though even sleep becomes a carefully orchestrated performance of imperial dignity that continues demonstrating your elevated status above ordinary mortality. The bedchamber awaits with preparations that transform rest into another expression of divine favor, where even unconsciousness occurs within settings designed to reinforce your connection to cosmic authority. Servants have prepared the sleeping arrangements with attention to detail that makes luxury hotels seem primitive by comparison. Sheets woven from silk, so fine they feel like cool water against imperial skin. Pillows stuffed with down from birds that migrate across continents. And blankets that combine warmth with weightlessness through weaving techniques perfected by artisans whose families have served imperial comfort for generations. The bed itself has been blessed by court religious authorities, who understand that imperial sleep requires spiritual protection as well as physical comfort. Evening prayers begin as you perform religious observances that combine genuine devotion with political necessity, acknowledging divine authority that legitimizes earthly power while requesting protection during the vulnerable hours when consciousness withdraws from imperial responsibilities. These prayers follow traditions established by your ancestors, creating continuity between current imperial authority and historical precedent that reinforces dynastic stability through spiritual consistency. The process of undressing involves ceremonial elements that transform simple clothing removal into ritual transition from public authority to private humanity, with garments that represent different aspects of imperial power being removed in specific sequences that symbolically shed the burdens of governance while maintaining the dignity essential for divine rulership. Even nakedness becomes political statement when servants handle imperial clothing with reverence reserved for sacred objects. Personal hygiene before sleep includes cleansing rituals that ensure imperial purity throughout nighttime hours, with preparations that combine practical health maintenance with spiritual requirements for maintaining divine favor. The water used for final washing has been blessed and perfumed. The towels have been warmed over braziers burning expensive incense, and the entire process occurs within ceremonial frameworks that make bedtime preparation into religious observance. Final security checks involve personal inspection of defensive arrangements by guards whose loyalty has been tested through years of service, with procedures that verify all protective measures are functioning properly without revealing complete security details to any single individual. These checks provide reassurance that allows relaxation while maintaining awareness that imperial safety requires constant vigilance even during unconscious hours. Court physicians provide final health assessments that monitor imperial physical condition while preparing medications that might be needed during nighttime hours, with treatments that combine traditional remedies with empirical observation developed through generations of serving imperial health needs. These medical preparations acknowledge that imperial mortality affects millions of lives, making personal health a matter of state concern rather than individual welfare. The bedchamber itself creates an environment designed to promote rest while demonstrating continued imperial authority. Walls decorated with precious materials that catch candlelight in patterns suggesting cosmic harmony. Ceilings painted with astronomical designs that connect earthly authority to celestial order. And air perfumed with incense that creates sensory experiences unavailable to ordinary mortals. Personal reflections on the day's events provide opportunities for private assessment of imperial performance, policy decisions, and political developments that affect the empire's future direction. These quiet moments of analysis occur without advisory input, creating space for honest evaluation that court protocol makes impossible during public hours, when imperial infallibility must be maintained regardless of private doubts or concerns. Historians still argue whether Mughal emperors experienced genuine peace during sleep or maintained psychological vigilance that made true rest impossible given the constant threats and responsibilities that accompanied absolute power. The surviving accounts suggest both moments of genuine tranquility combined with awareness that imperial authority never completely relaxes, even during unconscious hours. As consciousness gradually fades, the sounds of the palace at night provide a backdrop that confirms imperial security while suggesting the vast networks of human activity that continue operating while you sleep. Guards maintaining their watches, administrators processing urgent communications, and servants preparing for tomorrow's imperial requirements. The empire never sleeps, even when its ruler does. Candlelight dims gradually as attendants extinguish flames according to schedules designed to provide security without creating fire hazards, leaving the bedchamber in darkness. That's never complete. Subtle illumination remains available for emergency situations, while allowing natural sleep cycles that even imperial authority cannot entirely control. The transition to sleep becomes the day's final demonstration that absolute power coexists with human limitation, that divine authority operates through mortal beings who require rest, and that even emperors must surrender consciousness to natural cycles that connect imperial life to universal human experience. And so you drift into dreams where the weight of empire dissolves like morning mist, where the golden chains of absolute power loosen their grip on consciousness, and where the shadow of God on earth becomes simply another sleeping soul, surrendering to the ancient rhythm that connects all living things. The silk sheets seem to embrace you with the gentleness that power rarely allows, while distant sounds of the palace at night, the soft footsteps of guards, the whispered prayers of night watch servants, the subtle settling of ancient stones, create a lullaby that money cannot buy and authority cannot command. Your breathing deepens, slowing to match the eternal cadence that emperors and peasants share alike, reminding even imperial consciousness that some experiences transcend worldly hierarchy. The day's magnificent burdens, the judgments that affected millions, the ceremonies that demonstrated divine favor, the endless performance of absolute authority, all fade into the democracy of dreams, where silk and burlap offer equal comfort to sleeping minds. In sleep, you join the universal human experience that no amount of wealth can alter, no degree of power can improve, and no earthly authority can extend indefinitely. The palazzo's golden splendor continues glowing around your resting form, but consciousness has traveled beyond the reach of precious metals and political necessity into realms where imperial majesty becomes simply human peace. Tomorrow will bring another day of magnificent excess, political theater, and the exhausting privilege of shaping history through will and whim. But tonight, in the gathering embrace of sleep, even emperors find the rest that transforms mortality into something almost eternal. Sweet dreams wherever you are, and can remember that beneath all our different circumstances, we all share the same night sky, the same need for rest, and the same quiet hope for peaceful dreams that connect us across centuries and continents alike.